There's a word in Nigeria's constitution that could mean the country doesn't have a legitimate president. That word is "and". Let me explain. To win an election, you have to get the most votes, but you also have to get 25% of the votes in 2/3 of the states and the capital. Why the interpretation of this word could be the breaking point in a country where political operatives snatch ballot boxes and vote counts are simply changed with the stroke of a pen is part of a larger story. The story is about how imperfect democracy really works, and elections and power. It's about how people's everyday lives and even the very fabric of a country can be determined by just a few words on a page. It's about how the law, which is supposed to interpret those words, is meant to be impartial, but its decisions, one way or the other, affect people's interests, which is political in nature. So here's what's happening.
Political power is not going to be served in a restaurant. Fight for it, grab it, snatch it. At all costs.
On the morning of February 25th, the day of the Nigerian election, many Nigerians went out to vote with a new sense of trust and hope. They were picking between these guys: Bola Tinubu of the ruling party, Atiku, who was a former vice president, and Peter Obi, who was challenging that two-party system. Nigerians have had little confidence in elections in the past because to vote in a presidential election was to brace yourself for the inevitable aftermath of fraud. Elections would be rigged because elections were always rigged. But the question was how badly.
Senator Manso, can I just quickly clarify? Did I hear you say that you helped rig elections before now?
Yes, I did.
This time, Nigeria spent $600 million to organize the elections, and they bought thousands of these machines. It's called a BVAS, and it meant politicians couldn't just make up votes that didn't exist, which is a thing that they used to do. A new law was passed last year, and it was supposed to change everything. It made it that the results from polling stations had to be transmitted electronically, instead of physically transporting them to collation centers like this. And this guy, Mahmood Yakubu, who was head of the election body, promised Nigerians that would immediately be uploaded to a secure server. That way, everyone would know that their votes from each of their polling stations would be counted and they'd be sent to the collation center in Abuja. By the evening of February 25th, that trust had dissipated. Election workers arrived hours late, sometimes without even the election materials, like ink or ballot papers. There were reports of violence, there was a shooting at a polling unit, and political operatives were stealing and destroying ballot boxes left and right. But that's just par for the course. Look at how casually this voter scolds a ballot box thief. Nigerians waited for hours in bad weather, in darkness, under the threat of violence to make sure that their votes would count.
I think what people have to understand is that Nigerians didn't just vote and leave. They stayed at their polling units till 1, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. and counted those results with the INEC officials.
LOP 31, LOP 32, LOP.
The results that were supposed to be uploaded instantaneously were delayed, and despite that, Mahmood started announcing votes in Abuja. He declared a winner at 4 a.m. before all of the results sheets were uploaded to the portal for the country to see. When the results started to trickle in, they looked like this. They were crossed out, Tipexed, manipulated. Even with these clearly altered results, the votes on the portal didn't even match up with the totals announced by Mahmood in the capital.
A lot of of the results that are being uploaded onto the database do not compare with the results that people took pictures of on their phone.
Look, this is the largest local government in River State. Mahmood declared just over 3,000 votes for the Labour Party candidate, but you could count 75,000 votes on their portal. The BBC did. The other contestants are fighting in court and they do have mountains of evidence, but Bola Tinubu sits in Aso Rock. But this time, they aren't just arguing that the election was rigged. They're arguing that he never won the election in the first place, even with the result discrepancies. So the Supreme Court has to interpret the Constitution and they could make a ruling that would change elections in Nigeria forever. The Constitution says that a candidate must win not less than a quarter of the votes cast at the election in each of at least 2/3 of all states in the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory. Now, there are 36 states in Nigeria. So does this rule mean that you have to meet the requirement in 25 states, which is 2/3 of 37, and you're counting the capital as a state? Or does this mean you have to meet the requirement in 24 states, which is 2/3 of 36, and Abuja separately? To understand this argument, you have to understand Nigeria's capital. You see, Abuja is a special federal territory that's kind of like Washington, D.C. It's treated like a state in some cases, but it's definitely not a state. Every state is like a mini country that has its own government with a governor and a legislature, but the capital has neither. The president functions as the executive governor of the capital, but he delegates his authority to the minister of the FCT. The minister of the FCT makes their budget, he allocates their resources. But how can the president, through the minister, oversee the capital if they don't have the support of even 25% of its population? The other argument is that Abuja is treated like a state in other aspects of the constitution, which should equally apply here. On top of that, if there's a 25% requirement in Abuja, it could give them veto power over the rest of the country, which has 20 times more voters. Now, the Supreme Court has to get in the mind of the framers of the Constitution to understand what they meant. But our Constitution was made in 1999, so why don't we just ask them?